Alright, so Ne Zha 2 just came out in English in theaters this weekend, and of course I had to see it because it is the highest grossing animated movie of all time, mostly thanks to Chinese audiences, but I had to see it. I'm also going to take a little bit of time to talk about the first Ne Zha because I did watch it right before going into this movie, and while I don't think it's necessary to watch the first one and then go to the second movie, however, I do think watching the first movie helps tremendously in understanding the world and the characters. So what is Ne Zha and Ne Zha 2 really about? Well, I would point you towards IMDb because it's kind of hard to explain the plot, but basically it's a story about friendship, betrayal, family, and kind of training to become the chosen one. The very first thing I noticed about Ne Zha 2 was the quality of animation and the budget. Holy shit. I don't know how much this movie cost, but it definitely was not cheap to make, which is a good thing because it made a lot of money. But just the quality of animation, the sheer scale of things, the action, the cinematics, extremely over the top, not in a bad way, and quite a bit of improvement over the first film. And the first film looked great, and was great. So something I really liked about Ne Zha 2 was this whole idea of you never really know who the bad guy is. You think you might know what the bad guy's motivation is, you think you might know who the bad guy is. They do a complete 180, and honestly, it made for a very entertaining movie-going experience. Something else that I really enjoyed about Ne Zha 2 was the action. And if you've seen the trailers, you know there's going to be some good action. The scope of this movie is insane. There is an ending fight scene that would put Lord of the Rings to shame. There are so many on-screen characters. At times it is kind of a cluster, but it is visually just stunning. It really is. Like, I'm not sure I've seen any American studio make something that looks quite like this. Now, though, of course, there were a few things I did not like about the movie, and one of those was the comedy. This is a kids' film after all. Most of these jokes are for the children, and honestly, there are really not that many jokes for the adults. Not really any innuendos. While there are a couple of jokes that did make me chuckle, overall I would say this is not a comedy movie for adults. But the kids were laughing the whole time, so that's good. Now, something that I think the first movie does quite a bit better than the second movie is the pacing. The first movie is about an hour 50 long, and every single scene, every single line of dialogue, the editing is so fast-paced. Everything just matters in the first movie. It starts, it's over, and you feel like it was a complete whole experience. Honestly, no changes needed for the first movie, at least in the editing department. Second movie, it's almost 2.5 hours long, and while it is grander in scale, it's just not quite as tight of an edit. There are definitely a few scenes that drag on, and the ending especially. This movie ends 3 times. It's like, okay, well, I am entertained. You probably could have ended it 15 minutes ago. Something that I also think the first movie did quite a bit better than the second movie was the characters. Now, I know it's pretty much the same characters from the first as the second movie, but in the first movie it was much more of a character-driven story. You're meeting these characters for the first time, we're learning about them. It's not this grandiose scale, it's literally mostly about the 2 main characters, and I think it worked better in the relationship department. I think it worked better in the writing department. Overall, I think the story was a little tighter and honestly better. I'm not saying that Ne Zha 2's story was bad in any sense, but it definitely is a little more convoluted. It's not quite as focused as the first film. And the English voice acting in both films is really good. There were a couple of characters that changed voices from film to film, but overall, in both movies, I quite enjoyed the voice acting, and I actually thought they did a good job with it. Nobody really stood out as a bad egg. So if I was going to rate the first movie, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I did quite enjoy the movie. I don't think it hits peaks as some other animated films, but overall, very tight story, very well written, and I did enjoy the characters quite a bit. Now, when I'm thinking about rating Ne Zha 2, I'm going to have to give it just 1 tick lower than the first movie. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I still really liked the characters of the film. I thought the animation was spectacular, and the visuals were definitely awe-inspiring. The movie's just a little more convoluted. It could have used maybe 15 minutes less of screen time. And the comedy didn't really hit for me, but I did very much enjoy the writing. I enjoyed not really knowing who was going to be the bad guy. And overall, I did have a good time at the movies, which is why I go to the movies. So if you do want to check out Ne Zha 2 in theaters, I highly recommend going this weekend or at least next weekend, because my theater was kind of empty. There was only 10 or 15 other people. But either way, if you've seen the movie, let me know what you thought of it down below. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you want to. See you next time.